What would you do if you had to go a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, without bathing or being able to flush your toilet because you have no running water in your home? What would you do if you had to sweat it out for weeks at a time in 90-degree temperatures, even though you're indoors, because you either A, can't afford to run the air conditioner, or B, you don't even have electricity in the house? What would you do if you had to go days without eating because you had to save up the little bit of food that you did have so that you could feed your kids during their upcoming weekend visitation? And what if I told you that all those things were actual hardships I had to endure during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's all because of the child support system in the state of Texas? The purpose of these videos started out being a call for help. Me just trying to get some assistance, get awareness about my situation so that I could get some intervention from the family court and the injustice that I was having to endure and getting what should have been something simple, just a reduction in my child support based on the current laws and guidelines of the family court system. But as my story got out more and more, what I was trying to do, what I was going through, I was being introduced to more and more men who were going through the same thing. And then it became, hey, you got to get your story out there, because getting your story out there is getting our story out there. And this evolved into a full documentary about my experience in the child support system. And I'll be honest with you, during the first year of the pandemic especially, I didn't think I was going to make it. And it wasn't because of the virus itself. While I was afraid of getting sick and having to go to the hospital and there not being enough beds or enough ventilators, so on and so forth, my biggest fear was, would I be able to survive the child support system because of the financial burden it was placing on me? And I don't mean the child support itself, by itself. I mean the fact that it was over the legal limit and was ignoring the guidelines put in place to make sure that both parents are able to support themselves and the kids while they're with them. And it was because of that system, that I have to make this video. I have to show just how flawed this system is and how I didn't have the basic necessities to live during the pandemic. And it's all because of the child support system in the state of Texas.
The COVID-19 pandemic has put enormous pressure on families to fulfill the most basic need, putting food on the table.
I lost my job in the middle of March.
And now it's getting down to the nitty-gritty.
I never thought I'd need help.
All across the country, people are risking exposure out of desperation. Lines of cars extending for miles, iconic sports arenas repurposed into massive food banks.
Hunger knows no bounds.
Every food bank is trying to make sure that people in their community don't go hungry.
As you can see from our Sky 2 camera, the line of cars stretched for well over 2 miles along the feeder road of 290.
It helps a lot.
In these vehicles were families like the Pages, who waited in line nearly 3 hours.
I missed one the other day, and this is like a dream come true.
Brent Page says he came for water, canned goods, and snacks for his kids. Page has lost his job due to the pandemic and says he never thought he'd need help like this.
It's been life-changing, and we never saw this coming, so it's kind of devastating.
17 million more Americans could now face hunger because of the coronavirus pandemic.
If there is one image that can clearly show us how this health crisis has become an economic crisis in this country, it is this right here. The Pittsburgh Gazette captured video of hundreds of cards lining up for the Greater Pittsburgh Food Bank before it opened yesterday. Some waited 5 hours as volunteers distributed emergency supplies to 1,500 families, and then they ran out.
If you were fortunate enough to never have to go to one of those food banks or sit in one of those lines, count your blessings and be thankful. It was a humbling and definitely demoralizing experience. And it wasn't so much the fact that you had to wait in the long lines or you had to swallow your pride and go ask for, you know, help in the form of a handout. It was the fact that you did those things and there was still a chance that you came home with nothing. I learned it was about 2 or 3 times of coming home empty-handed, and I learned not to go to any of the food banks that they were talking about on the news or mentioning on the radio, because that was where everybody was going. And you'd sit in this long line for hours and they'd run out of food before you got to the front of the line. I remember this one time I was sitting in line. It had been at least an hour, hour and a half. And I had kind of zoned out, spaced out, just sitting there, and what snapped me out of it was seeing all the red brake lights that were in front of me start, you know, doing this kind of domino effect and turning to white reverse lights, and then people turning around and folks honking at folks, you know, blocking traffic, trying to turn around and leave. And me and a couple other cars, you know, we've got our windows down and we're hanging out the window trying to flag somebody down, you know, yelling, hey, you know, just trying to get some information, to be honest, to trying to stop them so that we could ask a question that we already knew the answer to, and that was that they were out of food. This one guy stops, you know, he's yelling, telling, you know, me in the car, I remember the car in front of me, we're all listening to him, and he's saying, hey, yeah, they're out of food, but there was some other place, I think it was a rec center or something. I remember they said they had food this rec center had food on Richmond. But word was that they were running low as well, and so you had to hurry up. And now, so I go to turn around, but now I have a decision to make. I was able to get somebody to stop and help me out, tell me where the next place to go. And the cars behind me saw that too. And so while that guy stopped for me, he didn't stop for the people behind me. He kept going. And so now the people behind me, they're flagging me down, trying to get me to stop. And you know, you don't want to be that guy who gets help but then doesn't return the favor. But at the same time, if I stop for them, I might miss out on getting food for myself and my family. I did stop. Stopped for the first person, told them, stopped for a second. It was a family, car full of people and kids. And then I stopped for a third person. And after that, I kept going. And I get there and I sit in line for another 45 minutes, only for them to run out of food 4 cars in front of me. And that's just how it was during that time. You never knew if you were gonna have food to eat day in and day out. It was always a struggle. Well, for some of us, it was a struggle to put food on the table, and it seemed like it was never going to end. You know, days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and for me, it was over a year of struggling to have food on a weekly basis, let alone a daily basis.
This was without any kind of warning. I thought 2 weeks, that's it, everything is back to normal. And here we are, 6 months now, devastated, still panicking, and it just seemed to be getting worse.
And it did get worse, at least for those of us on child support in the state of Texas. I can't speak for any of the other states, but in Texas, the child support system put such a stranglehold on us financially that a lot of us just weren't able to live and provide the basic necessities of life. To give you my personal example, every 2 weeks when I got my unemployment check, I had a hard decision to make. It was either take that little bit of money and buy enough groceries to feed only myself for a week or so, or buying enough groceries to feed myself and my children for just one weekend, or pay a bill, light bill, water bill, gas bill. You know, and I'll be honest, in the beginning, I made the mistake of choosing food every time. If it were between having electricity in the home or food to eat, I would choose food. If it was running water or the gas, natural gas for the home or food, I would choose food. And that's the way I had to live for over a year, a general inability to provide the basic needs of life. And this was all because of the child support system delaying, reducing my legal obligation to the legal amount.
The coronavirus has caused immense financial hardships for millions of people across the country. And unfortunately, just because your paycheck shrinks or disappears doesn't mean your bills do.
Americans have been racking up utility debt during the pandemic. They now owe companies close to $20 billion, up 67% from the average year. A study in Massachusetts found 30% more families are now at least 90 days behind on their bill. Early in the pandemic, at least 32 states issued emergency orders to prevent companies from cutting people's power, but nearly all have expired, and shutoffs have surged. One study found close to 1 million American households had their power cut over a 12-month span, and that's just from 17 states.
We think the real number should be around 3.4 million households.
As I close out part 2 of this documentary, I feel the need to make something very clear. I am in no way, shape, or form saying or implying that child support should be done away with altogether. It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is there are rules and guidelines to the amount of child support being set. Those rules and guidelines are there for a reason. And the problem comes in when the family court ignores those rules and guidelines in order to keep as much money flowing into the system as possible. In this video and in the previous video, I spoke about the hardship placed on me because of child support and being on unemployment. But to be honest with you, that condition, that hardship still exists, because while I am back to working full-time, I am not back to making the 6-figure salary I was prior to the pandemic, and thus my child support is still far more than my total income every month. And because of it, the Attorney General is still taking more than half of everything I earn. And I am still unable to pay my bills, feed my children, keep a roof, pay for a roof over my head. And if it weren't for the government, you know, it's funny, a government entity is the one that put me in this position. But if it weren't for government aid in the form of food stamps, I wouldn't be able to feed my children when they're with me. I wouldn't be able to feed myself. I've been asked on numerous occasions, how can a family court judge know that the child support amount that she's ordering is not only violating the state guidelines, but also making it to where you are unable to feed yourself or your children? And my response to that question is, I don't know. The only thing I can think of is, I guess if you've never had to worry about where your next meal is coming from, it's easy to be dismissive of someone else's hunger.
All those people are lined up near a Houston area shopping center today, but they were not there to shop.
Totally different reason. They were in line trying to get something that some of us take for granted every single day, and that is food for their family.